Thank you very much, Yarrick, for that introduction. Now, you did say we should say something about the weather. Well, here I am, Stephanie Marshall, Vice Principal of Education in London, where the weather, I have to say, is scarily mild, which it normally wouldn't be at this time of the year. But I think I need to say that because we need to take account of certain grand challenges that we're all facing. I'm delighted to be also joined by Professor Janet de Wilde and her team from the Queen Mary Academy, who have amazing expertise in assessment, and assessment and feedback, but also authentic assessment and what we're doing in that space. So you'll be hearing more about that in a minute. I'm just here really as the face of Queen Mary, and then I'll pass up over to the team who have the real substantive expertise. But I just want to say a few things as background so you know a bit about me and then also a bit about Queen Mary itself. So Janet, if I could have the next slide, please. When Yarrick approached me about doing this Friday SLO talk, and I have to say thank you so much, Yarrick, for contacting me and saying, would I be prepared to do something for your Friday talks, which I think is such a great innovation. He was referring to this handbook for teaching and learning in higher education, which of course covers off a range of key concerns for educators, and assessment being a big one. I haven't included all the pages of the table of contents, but there are actually 2 chapters in here on assessment, one from somebody in Australia where I think they do some amazing work on authentic assessment, and others on just frameworks for assessment. Next slide, please. And then looking at Queen Mary, I just wanted to do some headlines, and I'm not going to go through all of this. That is our university. So just so you know what it looks like, very traditional looking. We do have some other campuses, and the key thing that I want to really emphasize here is we are a Russell Group university. Now, if you've not heard of Russell Group universities are equivalent really to the UK Ivy League. However, we pride ourselves on being really, really inclusive. And certainly Yarrick talking to us a bit before this seminar, telling us also about pathways through and the community colleges, which I'm sure are going to be the shape of the future of higher education in the UK, because we've got to look at that continuity through into higher education. And the 2+2 models is what we call it here. In terms of looking at that penultimate bullet point, Queen Mary is a global leader in tackling embedded inequalities and transforming lives. We do this in both our research. Our research is focused on that, as is our assessment and our education. And we find ourselves in a really unique position of suggesting as well that any of our research and our education is all about opening the doors of opportunity. So that's our key mission that drives us, and it's really in our DNA. Next slide, please. If we look at excellence in education and the student experience, if you look at the background of our students, I've just put a number of things here, and it's probably not so dissimilar to things that you'll know in the US as well. 46% is what I'd highlight in terms of first in their families to go into higher education. So that's rather unique in terms of a Russell Group university. I think it's also important because we then think we've got to do much more support for students as they go along. And of course, assessment and the ongoing feedback is absolutely crucial in terms of helping them raise their game. Because unlike other universities in the Russell Group, where they might just have students coming in, they're used to performing well in traditional exams, etc. Assessment isn't quite the challenge that it is in our particular university. So we put a lot of emphasis then on that ongoing formative and summative to make sure that we're supporting our students and really achieve the best possible outcomes that they can. If you want to know more about our approach to understanding our educational approach, please do look below. So I think next slide, please. Further to that, then I want to say thank you for listening to that introduction, but I'm going to pass you over now to the great team that will guide you through the next sections then in terms of looking at assessment, and also then looking at how we're educating our educational leaders to be able to lead on what new forms of assessment as well. So over to you, please. Over now to Professor Janet de Wilde, who is the director of our Queen Mary Academy.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to share our practice with you today. And I'm going to introduce Stephanie Fuller and Emily Salins. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yes, hello everybody. As Janet says, an absolute delight to be here and to meet you all. So I'm Emily Saline from the QMUL Academy. I'm head of education programs there, working with Steph, who's going to introduce herself in a minute, to, among other things, to enhance assessment across the university. Yeah, over to you, Steph.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. Yes, so I work in the QMUL Academy with my colleagues here, and our work is focused around supporting academics with their education practice, including around assessment.
Thank you very much, both. And I think we can start the first presentations on assessment. So I'll hand over to you both to lead on the assessment presentation. Thank you.
I'll do that. Just share my slides. Just bear with me for a minute while I'm trying to get this to work. Share. My computer is very slow, so bear with me. You should be seeing my slides now, and I put it in. Yeah, is that all good?
Yes, that's good.
Thank you. Yes, that's the worst bit done. Okay. All right. So here's our title. We're going to talk about exploring assessment choice to enhance practice and inclusivity in higher education. You will have noticed there's only two of us, Steph and myself, but this work is also the work of our colleague, Dr. Joe Trelfa, who's not able to be with us today. So to start with, we were going to talk about our context, but of course, Stephanie has done a wonderful scene setting. So I will skip over this work, this area, but just really emphasizing again this really important element in our mission, really as a university to be the most inclusive Russell Group university and to support social justice for our students. And this is really highlighted in our values as well, the values of the university. As you can see, inclusivity is at the core here. And we really, the purpose of the university is to want to make a difference to students' learning, to improve their outcomes. And we have this phrase here at Queen Mary, we talk about opening the doors of opportunity for our students. So really making a difference, not to their learning, not just to their learning, but to their lives. And Stephanie has shown you the diversity of our student population and what that means then. So assessment then, why really matters particularly. We really know that it does. It's well articulated in assessment literature. Here, thought-provokingly underlined by Bowden Falchikov, who emphasized the fact that assessment drives students' learning. Bard also famously said that you can survive bad teaching, but you can't survive a bad assessment, which I often think about. You can recover from poor teaching because you can seek other resources, but bad assessments, they leave really lasting damage. They misalign goals, they discourage learning and have a negative impact on outcomes. So we come to Jan MacArthur, who's another very influential theorist and researcher for us here at Queen Mary. Her work on assessment for social justice really shapes our thinking. So her view that looking at assessment is a key element in supporting social justice in education is at the core of our thinking as well. And inclusive assessment strategies, therefore, are key to achieving equity. And yet, within the UK, at least, and within across sector, and particularly so in Russell Russell research intensive universities, Russell Group universities, there is across the board student dissatisfaction with assessment and feedback. So they really report that. We have in the UK a national student survey which checks, which surveys all final year students for undergraduates, and this question of dissatisfaction really repeated and constant year on year across sector is a really conundrum. Now, within that, and within that situation, and then thinking around a bit more about about assessment and going back to our values and our focus on inclusivity, we really are looking in our university at establishing inclusive assessment approaches, and to do so for all students across the boards. And that is not an easy thing. And assessment really is one of the key sites of our work, as we were saying earlier. So how can we do so? And that's the rest of the talk will be really trying to explore this, how we can make assessment change across an institution. Now, there are opportunities and perceived perceived barriers to achieving change at university level. Like, you know, so as Stephanie was mentioning, large university, 35,000 students, a bit. Actually, in comparison to you, perhaps small, but quite big for us and for the UK. So, and one of our key points that we may have pockets of excellence, but how do we get that consistent approach across? So, any change of assessment, starting with the difficulties to end up on the positive, on the positive, and I won't rehearse all the details. You know, I think you know them well as well. Sustainability of approach is essential. Equity in assessment has to work within the limited resources that we have. Another area to approach is thinking about students' own expectation and understanding of assessment, and that really linking with also educational philosophies from educators as well, and particularly attachment to certain approaches, and that needs to be taken into account. We also have in the UK, as I'm sure is in the US as well, strong regulatory frameworks which play an important part in indicating what is and isn't possible. So we have quite a lot of barriers, or at least things to think about before we launch into the blue sky dreaming of what assessment might look like. But there are really clear opportunities. We can't deny, and we know that educators want to improve their students' outcomes and experience, and they are listening to their students when they tell them the way in which we currently do assessment may not work for them. There's also workload considerations, and in conversations about changing assessment approaches, I think that is quite a key one for staff, of course, but also for students. So assessment change, which makes assessment workload more bearable, more manageable, is very attractive. Assessment change that makes assessment more enjoyable is also more attractive. And of course, we mentioned, I think it was before we got the presentation started, but as a precursor to this session, we were talking with Jarek about the questions of AI and what a disruptor it is. It is both positive and a danger, I suppose, and a risk. But from the positive point of view, it really the disruption that came through the arrival of AI in education means that we are able to start conversations with colleagues that may before have been more resistant or cautious. So who's driving this work? A whole host of people, like a whole group of people, a constellation, I don't know how to call it, a mosaic. We had put a lot of terms to describe this. But it's really important to note it comes from students themselves to policymakers, senior leaders. So that work may seem a little bit disjointed, and really the key is working together. So again, this paper is really trying to unpick this and try and see how we could do this. So the work then appears in different forms. So I was talking about regulations and policies, regulatory framework. There's clearly quite a lot of work around how we can put in policies and regulations which make assessment more successful for students, and focusing quite a lot on summative assessment and feedback. So in the UK, there's been a lot of work on turnaround time, how fast the students receive their feedback, how they can use it for the next piece of assessment, for example. There's a lot of work around academic integrity and ensuring that assessment is reliable. And there's quite a lot of work as well on reducing assessment points. Reduction in assessment. So these are really frameworks and regulations and policies that we are asking the institution to comply with. In parallel or linked with that, there's the more developmental approach, which is focusing more on assessment for and as learning, looking at the student-centered approach, and really increasingly in the UK, as is the case in the US, I know as well, really exploring the harm that assessment can do to students, and exploring sometimes it's called compassionate approach or trauma-informed approach, or caring approaches to assessment. So looking at ways in which assessment can nurture well-being and indeed hopefully joy for students and staff, and look at ways in which students and staff can bring their whole self to assessment. Now, that's quite a contrast with the regulatory aspect, but working hand in hand, if I may use that metaphor, can be is what we're trying to do. But of course, there is always that attachment to traditional, tried and tested disciplinary approaches. We've always used exams or MCQs in our multiple choice questions in our work, or we do not trust any other method of assessment than the essay. That is the way in which students, outcomes will be proved. So that is quite a strong element, so we have to take that into account. But we know, don't we, that if we keep doing the same, we will not create anything new. We will only reproduce what already exists. And this quote from Carrillo and Thompson, really helpful and important work on trauma-informed pedagogy that we draw on, if you like, as in our thinking. We also draw from the work of the Berkana Institute, which we're going to come back to towards the end of this presentation, which really emphasizes the importance of networks and relationships in making a difference, in changing practice. So let's keep in mind this question of networks and relationships. That's quite a key element of what we've been trying to do. So moving on now to what we've been trying to do. So I've been really doing quite a lot of framing here. So as we were saying earlier, we are from the Queen Mary Academy, which is an educational development unit and more. But really a large part of our work is working with educators and developing their practice. And within that, we have the postgraduate certificate in academic practice, which is a teaching qualification that new lecturers have to take when they join the profession and when join Queen Mary. So this is a real opportunity there in that program for us to work with those colleagues and model approaches and hopefully have some impact on their practice. So looking at assessment, we've been working, among other things, at assessment choice and asking ourselves what impact modeling assessment choice with those participants would have both on them, on their practice, and what impact, what's the potential of that approach would have in driving inclusive practice across the university around assessment. So that was our question. That was got us started. Now, why assessment choice, among other things, as an inclusive practice? Mostly because we know from the assessment literature that assessment choice promotes self-regulation in learners, self-efficacy, and therefore engagement and performance. This links really nicely with the work of universal design for learning as well, taking an anticipatory approach to inclusivity. So by giving students a choice on how they demonstrate they have met the learning outcome, we remove the barriers of the method of assessment, and we focus on showing they've met the learning outcomes. The test is not on the method, it's on the learning outcome and the learning. And so we've tried this with our participants of the PGCAP, and Steph will take us through this work and the findings of our study.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, so as Emily has outlined, we're really looking at how small changes that we introduce within our educational development work can lead to much bigger ripples of change out across an institution. So we carried out a very small scale around the introduction of assessment choice within PGCAP. So there had previously been a written assessment as part of this course, a written curriculum design report, and we amended this assignment so that participants who are staff members at the university had the choice of submitting either a written assignment or a presentation, so a recorded presentation. We sought and achieved ethical approval for the study, and then all participants in the curriculum design module of the course were invited to respond to a survey after they completed the module. This was carried out last academic year, so across 2 cohorts of colleagues, we had 126 participants in the module and 22 responses to the survey. So a little bit of information for you here about the cohort, the survey respondents. You can see we have quite a reasonable spread of disciplinary areas. So Queen Mary has 3 main faculties, as you'll see: humanities, social sciences, medicine and dentistry, and science and engineering. So we had quite a good balance there, but quite an interesting skew in terms of career pathway. For academic colleagues at our university, there are a number of different contract types that they can be working on: teaching and scholarship, which is more education focused; teaching and research, which is more of your traditional academic contract; teaching and professional practice, more for professionals who have then come into higher education; and clinical contracts as well. And as you can see, by far the majority of respondents were in the more traditional teaching and research roles, which we thought was interesting. So going into the detail of the responses now, we had in the survey a range of Likert scale questions as well as some free text. So we wanted to find out to what extent our respondents found choice in the assessment process made it a positive experience, made it more useful and relevant to their practice, made the assessment process less stressful, enabled them to demonstrate abilities more effectively, and the extent to which it made the assessment a more inclusive experience. So these were some of our hypotheses that we were kind of looking to test. And as you can see, there's quite a strong response. So in terms of the percentage of respondents who agreed or strongly agreed with the top 2 statements there, so assessment was generally became a more positive experience, more relevant to their practice. And at the bottom of the slide as well, colleagues found that the choice made assessment more inclusive for them. However, there was less agreement that that this made assessment less stressful, and similarly in terms of demonstrating abilities more effectively, less agreement there. Thank you, Emily. So some of the free text comments which were interesting. We asked colleagues what their initial reactions were when they sort of saw that they had the choice of how to complete the assignment. And we've got a nice range of responses. So colleagues being really pleased that they were that we were modeling the kind of approaches that we were talking about, so they get to experience it from a student perspective. Positive, inclusivity is mentioned, more inclusive, pleased that there was a different option than the standard written assignment, somebody finding it less stressful, however, somebody finding it hard to make a decision, and surprise as well at being offered this option from one colleague. Thank you. So we asked colleagues to think a little bit about sort of the process of engaging with the assessment and whether it was easy for them to choose how they would approach it. So was it easy to choose? 3/4 said yes, and then a quarter of respondents sort of less sure. When we asked why, some found it very difficult. So there was quite a polarization in responses, very difficult for some colleagues. Some questions as well raised around understanding of the processes and how the less traditional option would be marked. For others, they kind of knew where their strengths lie, and it was a very easy choice for them. So one comment you see here about, yes, I love presenting, and then somebody else who knows their strength is writing, so they will always choose that. And then a final interesting comment by somebody who chose the presentation, sort of linking back to what Emily was saying earlier around sort of the pull of the old and the traditional approaches. So, you know, perhaps tempting to choose the more conservative, familiar format, tried and tested, or do you try and push away from that and go for the different, more innovative option? Okay, so we did some thematic analysis of free text responses as well, and just highlighting here some of the key themes which emerged from that. So lots of comments relating to choice being helpful and positive. Having the choice was surprisingly empowering. It's a great quote there. Quite a lot of comments about inclusivity, so feeling inclusive, feeling supportive, formats playing to different people's strengths, some neutrality expressed as well. As I mentioned earlier, a little bit of uncertainty emerging around requirements. And for some colleagues, sort of at the opposite end of the spectrum, it was more stressful than just being told, this is the assessment, no choice at all. Okay, so thus far we've been kind of looking at sort of findings around colleagues' own experiences of choice and assessment, but we also wanted to explore the potential for the wider impact of change across the university. So, you know, the extent to which participants might change their own practice as a result of having experienced this on our course. So we asked how many respondents would think that offering assessment choice is useful for their own students, and whether they were planning to implement this in practice as well. So as you can see, 90% of respondents thought this was a great idea, they'd like to do it, and 60% were actually planning to implement it in practice.
Stephanie?
Yes.
I don't know if you have quick, if you're going to address this later or not, but regarding the assessment choice, what was the most common choice that your professors did? Was it authentic assessments? Was it direct assessments? Was it formative assessments? What type of?
Far and away, the majority chose a traditional written assignment. Yeah, not many opted for anything different.
Is that right? Okay. You figure that will be, you know, authentic assessments will be the way to go, right? Or direct assessments. Because I mean, we're really focusing on the student skills, right? So yeah.
Yeah, and there was some, you know, recognition in the comments that, you know, the presentation option actually is quite authentic because they're teachers. This is kind of what they do in their classrooms. But yes, a very high proportion chose a written essay, traditional format. Thank you for the question. Okay, next slide, I think, Emily. Yeah, so just to summarize then, most of our respondents found having a choice positive, inclusive and less stressful. And the process by which they made that choice was impacted by a range of factors, including awareness of their own strengths and skills. A major factor, I think, the perceived ease of completion and time involved. So obviously these are really busy people. They're doing this course. They're also doing a full-time job. You know, what they're very strategic about completing the assessments, but also whether they were minded to embrace innovation, try new things. Uncertainty around some of the requirements was also a factor for some. And then, yeah, the potential impact for institutional assessment change, we see in the 90% who agreed, oh, actually, this is a good thing for my own students, and 60% planning to implement it. So through this small research project, we've identified some areas we want to explore further, both in terms of the assessment design work as well as change processes. So we think assessment choice and offering choice has great potential as a way to enhance inclusivity and support student well-being. So this is an area we want to explore further. Our findings kind of point to the fact that it needs to be a facilitated process, so we can't leave students alone with making this choice, and actually perhaps there needs to be more support around students' understanding of their own skills, where their strengths lie, in order to facilitate them to make a good choice, to make the right choice for them in terms of assessment. And then in terms of institutional change, we want to explore further what the barriers, what the hesitations are with the 10% of colleagues who didn't think it would be useful for their students, and the 30 to 40% who were not planning or did not wish to implement choice of assessment in their practice. So we want to explore further as well how modeling of approaches within our course, within PGCAP, can positively impact the enhancement of education and curriculum, and really seeing this as part of a change process.
So just getting to a wrapping up moment, just having a bit of a reflection on this now. First of all, one reflection we've had is this question of how difficult actually it is to change assessment, particularly how emotional attachment to certain modes of assessment, or how deep the beliefs may be. This quote is from another project I was involved in a previous institution at University of the Arts London, where we found really that rethinking assessment really means a rethinking of long-held beliefs, and that can be difficult and painful at times. And the relational aspect of this work is really important. Respecting prior practice is also key. Respecting that prior practice, and also valuing those practices. The colleagues choosing to keep on the, for example, the essay may be doing that because of attachment, or it may be because that's what they've been doing throughout, or it may be some lack of trust in the new method, and so on. So reflecting on this further, we were drawn to the work of the Berkana Institute, which I was mentioning earlier. So that's they have a two-loop model, which you can see, and we've simplified it in the picture. And in the references to this talk, you'll find a website where you can look further on that. The work of the Berkana Institute is they're looking at making community change and managing change and supporting communities in doing so, particularly around system change. So it's based on the idea that living systems decline, but they also grow. So the idea is there may be a dominant system which works for some, maybe even the majority, but not all. And there's also an emergent system which is new and potentially challenges the status quo. So as I quoted earlier, the new doesn't come from one single person, but from networks. So the two-loop system shows this. So it's important to identify who the pioneers are. The pioneers being the trailblazers, the people that try these new, they've tried these new approaches and are up for innovation, if you like, and to convene them, bring them together in community of practice where they then become connected. And then eventually identifying storytellers who publicize these new approaches. This is all quite abstract and theoretical. We'll apply it in a minute to assessment. But what we really liked as well about this approach is the notion of hospicing the old, which is a reminder that the old need respect and needs to be put to rest, so to speak, but also has a huge amount to teach us. So old approaches should not be disappearing, but should be integrated into the new. If we go back to these networks, we were talking about all those people we were talking about earlier, these were potentially appearing disjointed actors, working from all the different areas. We find that building networks and linking up and joining forces, basically, is the way forward. And our little research project is an attempt to really try and surface this kinds of network thinking. And then and over to you, Steph, for just to bring it all back together.
Yeah, so in the context of assessment and assessment change, the Berkana change process might look like moving away from exams or other traditional types of assessment as the dominant system, as has been, towards more innovative, authentic, and inclusive assessment as a new emergent system. And by engaging with early career academics through our education programs, we really hope to inspire them and support them on their journey towards becoming educational pioneers. And by connecting these colleagues and bringing them together as a community, we hope and we think we're developing a powerful driver of change. So within this conceptualization of the work, we see our roles as developers kind of moving between these different positions. And through this, we're both supporting the emergent system as well as taking care of the old, this idea of hospicing the old. Okay, just to conclude, and thinking about what next and where we go from here. So conceptualizing our work in this way has, I think, led us to reevaluate it so that we are valuing and positioning education development programs, as well as our other work, as part of a change process. It's also helped us understand that building a community among our participants, our course participants, is really crucial to this work as we support them on their journey from pioneers towards storytellers. So through this work, we're also developing our own positions through this understanding of the range of different roles that are needed for change, and the fact that at different times and different contexts, we may need to play the roles of pioneers, conveners, connectors, and storytellers. We are understanding, respecting, and recognizing both the old and as well the new through this. Okay, and that's it. Thank you.
Don't know if there's any questions on the assessment presentation from Steph and Emily. There's a question in the chat about, I don't know if you can see it, Emily, and from Steve. Yeah.
I'm just having a quick look. Should you read between positive stress, energizing, challenging, and negative stress, anxiety? Yeah, absolutely. So that's this question of what point does stress become harmful? So yes, the challenge of the assessment is certainly an important driver. You have to stretch your students, and that's actually a very frequent conversation in our institution, particularly within the context of being this part of this elite group and really wanting to keep the standards and so on, so it's not a question of making things too lax or less stressful. Well, it is making them less stressful for the students, but not, but not from the point of view of the challenge, I suppose.
Yeah, I think in conversations with colleagues, they often see being more inclusive as somehow sort of lowering standards or dumbing down. So yeah, part of our job, I think, is to say, no, it's just sort of doing things differently. You're still having that challenge there, but like you said, Emily, with consideration of, yeah, the right level of stress, the right kind of stress.
I mean, there's been some quite disturbing conversations in the UK actually around the mental health aspect of this, and some serious case of harm done to students, and therefore that and particularly around the lack of assessment choice for some of them. So yeah, so that is what we're talking about, rather than the good stress.
There's another question in the chat.
Yeah.
From
How
Ben.
to move participants through the Pioneers, Convener, Connector, Storyteller Continuum. Well, we've been trying to look at that. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about from the study what we're thinking about our participants, Steph, but if I can start by saying that having in particular the idea is the Pioneers model a new approach, or show a new approach, while it may be the same person then becoming a convener or being put in contact by someone like people like Steph and myself, or Janet. When we put it together, we bring together our innovative star educators and get them to really work together to show their really innovative, exciting practice. And by doing that, they become storytellers. And coming on board, maybe some colleagues that bit by bit may become innovators in their own just in the end. So you would imagine you think the pioneers are quite individual and unique to start with, but then they group together, being convened together, and then become storytellers. Yeah.
That's nice. Star educators. Yeah, we like that.
Go ahead, Enrique.
I was going to ask you. They're asking me, what is the support group look like at your institution?
What's the academy look like? Yeah.
As far as supporting the faculty.
Yeah. Emily, do you want to describe your team, and then I can describe the other team as well?
Okay, yeah, so our team we call the education and recognition team, and our focus is really very much on developing education practice, and it takes a whole range of ways. So we've talked today about our credit bearing teaching qualification, which is large part of our work, but we also have we do CPD, we organize CPD workshops, and which are bookable through a CPD system. People join, and then we do some really bespoke targeted support session for individual programs or schools within the university. So quite targeted discussions and some, so it takes a whole range of things. So we have all that kind of work, and then we have what's called the recognition approaches, which is through Advanced HE, which is worldwide, but recognizes different levels of or different kinds of practice around education, and they've got a fellowship system. Once I finish speaking, I put that in the link, so we support them that way. So that kind of, really supporting education practice through a range of approach, either general through training or through bespoke discussions. I think I will summarize, and then Janet can talk about the rest.
Yeah, so the total size of the academy is about 23 staff. And there's Emily's team is the biggest team focused on education practice, but we also have a team that's focused on innovation and scholarship. So we're really looking to drive innovation in practice, really looking to drive that the university wins awards in education. So that team is really looking at VR, immersive learning, where we can go for awards. Like we've had 4 of our project teams shortlisted for the QS Awards, the QS Reimagine Awards, so they're international awards. So we're really trying to sort of elevate education at the university. So we're quite, being a Russell Group, we're quite known for our research, and we're doing a lot of effort to raise our profile in education as well. And yeah, so that's, we also, which I'll be talking about in a minute, have a leadership team that are delivering leadership courses. So I'll come on to that in a moment. So that's sort of our offer around education, but it's, we do have colleagues that deliver into research and development, but the biggest part of our work is elevating education across the university. So I hope that helps understand the sort of size of support available across. Yeah.
I have a question, if you don't mind, just to follow up quickly on the inclusive assessment, right? That's obviously, it looks like it's really going to address the question of ownership and student agency, right? That students, the results of the survey obviously point to this, that it really is an answer to a lot of questions when it comes to equity discussions. But my question regarding this would be really kind of like more on a practical end. Qualitative research, as you know, is much more, let's just say, prone to subjectivity, and it generates, there's just the skills that are required to analyze the tons of data. How do faculty deal with this, considering that they are the ones who say that, yeah, I still would like to stick to writing assessment rather than anything else? And I think that's kind of like, voices from the past, in a sense that, in any topic, be it psychology or geography or history, we normally ask students to write something about it, right? Because this is a process that allows them to reflect. But that generates the data on one hand. On the other, that's the type of assessment that's really prone to this, AI invasion, right? Kind of a, for lack of a better expression. So that's now becoming more of a suspect, right? That since students can generate those responses with ChatGPT, why do we bother with this type of assessment, or what is it that we need to do differently? So if you could please speak to this, how do you feel this, to what extent, or how are faculty equipped to handle the amount of data, and then the AI, if that's an answer?
Well, that's a really that is you had the crux of the question, and there's quite a lot of discussions around there. I mean, Steph, you've done quite a lot of work around working with faculty to work with around authentic assessment, and also quite a lot of work around your graduate attributes that students are developing. I don't know, maybe you might want to say a little bit about that, if that's all right.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, much increasing focus at our university on skills and graduate attributes, as we call them, development for students, and actually, how we can look to assess those, and that, those being sort of much more practical, skills-based things, that lends itself to authentic assessments where students need to be applying, they need to be doing something. So I think this goes in hand really nicely with Queen Mary's focus on inclusivity and us in our roles trying to really promote inclusive methods, which often align up really well with authentic approaches, which are also less susceptible often to AI and the potential for being generated by Chat GPT. So I think that's a really big kind of positive for our faculty members, actually, as well, as a way of selling it, that actually, through almost one change, you can have all of these benefits.
And there's the development of the also the understanding of AI and use of AI as a graduate attribute. So it's also we're working with faculty as well to emphasize that this is not there's also this is also something to be explored and, dare I say, embraced, since this is where we are at. And maybe Janet might want to talk about also how we support educators and their use of AI in teaching.
Yeah, it's part of the talk I'm just about to give. So.
Sorry, it was a spoiler. Apologies. I'll be quiet.